Welcome to Mile High Reefers. I'm Scott Anderson, and I am joined by my good friend Darren DeGraw, Rogue Aquariums. Thank you for being here, Darren. It's great to see you.
Thanks, Scott.
So, I think today let's talk about flow. Let's have some fun and talk about the different flow options, and we'll just kind of give our experience and some of the settings and that kind of stuff we've used in the past. For those of you who don't know Darren, he does the Rogue Aquariums YouTube channel. And Darren, where can they find you online? I know you're big on Facebook and Instagram.
I have a small I have a smaller channel on Instagram right now, so I have a few followers on there. So I'm building it up right now, but you can find me on there, and I'm also on Facebook under Rogue Aquariums.
Nice. Yeah, I've been following your stuff. I've been watching your big build. And before this, we actually started talking about water flow and some of what you're going to be doing for your big tank. So I think that's just a great conversation for us to have. I don't know. When I do these kind of things, I like to just go old school and start with back in the old days. And when I got started in this hobby, water flow was a couple of maxi jets or just standard AC power heads you stuck in your tank. And if you got real fancy, you got one of those AC controllers that would turn one on and one off and cycle back and forth. And that was about as good as it's got. But things have changed a lot since 2006 when I got into the hobby. So water flow has gotten crazy. For your 210, or not your 210, for your 600, you were talking about some of the flow that you were starting to put together. So why don't you kind of walk us through the flow that you're currently putting on and in your 600-gallon tank?
Right. I have a couple of Ecotech MP60s I'll be running on one side, and I'm still up in the air what I want to run on the other side. So I've come to the conclusion that I'm going to need a lot of flow on there, even though it's going to be a mixed reef. So I'm contemplating on running two of the Gyre XF 350s or the 280s on the other side. My tank's still filling right now. It's been a week, so I've finally got water into the sump. Um, but I'm more than likely going to go with a set of dryers on the other side so I can maximize my flow and put some different patterns in there. I do like the Ecotechs, but it's not really my budget to go ahead and purchase two more right now since I've got quite a bit of funds going into the system already. So I'm going to go ahead and go with the dryers on the other side.
So MP60s are kind of like the original wave maker pump. They're from Ecotech. They're the ones without the cord. And I know that is like the thing that draws you to it the most. You got the wet side, you got the dry side, so your
Right.
cord is outside the tank.
Yeah, I hate cords. I really do. If I can, I don't like cords hanging around all over the place. So that's something I'm going to go have to, when I put the dryers in, I'm probably going to install them from the top instead of inside the tank. So I've just got to figure out a way to route the cords. But when you get a big system like that, you're going to have some cords. I'm just going to have to deal with it. But I do like the Ecotechs as far as having, the cord on the outside. And it's really nice. When I had a Red Sea Reefer, I was running two of the MP40s, and I was able to, to hide the cords somewhat. So I do like that when it comes to the Ecotech power heads.
So aesthetics, I think, are a huge part of flow. I mean, doesn't matter how great your flow is, it doesn't matter how good your core looks, if you're not happy with the way the pump looks in the tank. It's such an important part. Now, personally, the cords don't bug me like they do some people, but I do like the gyres because they mount up. You can mount them up real high and then just put that wall of water across the top of the tank,
Right.
which looks really cool. And it also helps hide those cords because everything's up high. You're not really deep down in. So that is an option that makes the gyres mount and look pretty good.
I agree with you on that. There's different ways you can mount the gyres, and that's probably something I'm going to do is mount the magnet on top of the tank and have the gyre right underneath it where I can point it downwards. Because as you know, when the gyres turn on, you can point them down and they flow upwards, and we're right in the middle of the tank. So I'm still kind of up in the air on that, but I'm probably going to lean more towards the gyros for the other side.
Which is way cool. I know back in the old days, one thing that was real popular was to put like a Tunzi or something right into the rock work to kind of blend it in. That was a real cool way to do it. The only problem is eventually you have to service that pump and get it out of the rock
Right,
work.
right,
But
right.
it's just such a cool look. So there's a lot of options. Actually, you hide your pumps in the rock work. There's a lot you can do to kind of hide those cords and hide that look and make it look the way you want.
Right.
But
On this system here, talking about hiding things, I have a 3 foot spray bar also that's been
yes, this is really cool.
right. So I've got the Rockwork hiding that. So basically, it's designed to blow the detritus out of there. Um, and it's on a closed loop, as you know, Scott. So it should work pretty good. So as soon as I get done filling it, hopefully it should be ready to fire up in the next couple of days. So it's taken a while to fill up, but when we did the mock setup on the tank, we talked about putting the spray bar in there on a closed loop, so it would take some of the detritus out of the rock work and blow it out. So then it could be suspended and caught in there.
So this sounds really cool. So let's make sure I understand what you're telling us. Basically, you've got a spray bar that's blowing water across the bottom of your tank
Right.
to eliminate that detritus, to keep it stirred up so it can't settle. So is your rock work actually lifted a little bit so that the water can flow under or around it, or how does that work?
No, the rock work is around it, but I've got a lot of flow throughs and a lot of holes for
Nice.
the fish to be able to go ahead and go in there and sleep at night. So, I'm sure some detritus will get trapped in there for the most part. A lot of it's going to get blown out because I didn't pack the rock work in there really tight. Like I made, holes in there for the fish to go through. So hopefully a lot of that detritus will be suspended up in the water column.
This actually sounds like a really cool setup. So I don't know how many people are familiar with closed loop. It's kind of an old school system. In the old days, part of the way they hid pumps was they would drill a hole in the overflow to get the water as to find a water source, and then they would run that pipe down to a big pump, and then that big pump is what they'd use for flow. And it was real popular, and it's still pretty popular with anemone tanks. But I love what you're doing here. You're using that as just a spray bar to go across the bottom and take care of that detritus issue, which is such a big deal. So it's a really cool way of adding flow as almost like a self-cleaning method down there. I really like that idea.
Right, right. Yeah, a friend of mine who built the tank, he suggested it to me. So I reviewed it, looked it over, and we went through it, and it just seemed like it was a good idea, especially for the size of the tank, because I'm dealing with a 4 foot wide system. So it made sense to do it. So hopefully it'll work pretty well and take a lot of the detritus out of there, and it won't get settled. But I'll also be running a sand bed in there too, but nothing real deep. I just like the aesthetics of the sand, so that's why I decided to go with a special reef grade. Not too deep though.
So you're running a grate down there to hold the sand in place? Is that what you're saying? Or
No, I'll be running a special reef grade sand by Carib Sea.
oh,
So
reef grate. I thought you
yeah,
said
reef
grate.
grade. Yeah.
Okay.
So I suspect that with the flow, if I go with the gyres and also the MP60s on the other side, I'm going to have some sand blown around there. But being a mixed reef, I won't have to have the same type of flow I would if I was just running a total SBS system. So I'll have to kind of play with it once I get the power heads mounted on both sides and then get the sand in there, and I can make the adjustments after that. But
Nice.
I'm looking forward to seeing how that spray bar works. So
Yeah, that's going to be a really cool setup. And you said you're powering it with Ecotex?
yes, I got two Vector L1s and then one Vector L1. So I have three total, two on the drain and one on the return.
That is a cool setup. So for your tank right now, you've got MP60s on one side, you've got your spray bar for the closed loop, and then you've also got your flow, that's your recirculation pump going from the sump up and down.
Right.
and
Right.
then you're looking to add more flow through gyres or something.
Right. Because the tank is fairly wide. It's 48 inches front to back, and then it's 8 feet long. So um, I do want to keep some SPS in there, as well as it's mostly going to be predominantly LPS, but I'm going to keep some SPS, some Digis and Monties. I like Monty caps like you do, and um, but I want to have some decent flow in there for them.
Yeah, that'll be really cool. It sounds like you're going to have some good programmability in there as well with the type of pumps. This is maybe the biggest gain in pump technology, because we went from power heads to the um, AC pumps that we're all used to, like the old AC Tunsies, to new DC style gyres and Ecotechs, and Tunsi makes awesome products. So we've got real controllability now. The flow pattern that I've been in love with, that I've been using on my tank, is I love to run my tank lower flow during the day and then higher flow at night. And I love this because the LPS under lower flow, they kind of come out more, they open up more, they look bigger, they look fluffier, they look amazing. And then I've noticed if you crank that flow up, they kind of pull in. So by running low flow during the day, the LPS and everything looks great. Well, then at night, I can just crank that flow up. I mean, I'll max out my gyres at like 100%. This kind of gives me two gains. First, I'm getting great flow in there so that the corals can breathe and stir up that detritus and everything. But it's also a good benefit because at this point, the LPS are all pulled in. So I'm not like damaging the LPS corals. So they're getting that really good flow when they're pulled in and can handle it. And then they're getting less flow during the day when they want to be open and get light and food and all of that. I know a lot of coral like to eat at night, but I think pretty much everything in my tank is trained to eat during the day these days.
Yeah.
But it's a really cool setup. Have you thought about how you're going to run your flow schedule through your tank?
Right now, I have a 87-gallon frag tank, and I do run a lower flow. But after you and I talked about it too, it makes sense. I do run a lower flow on there because I do have mostly LPS in my frag tank. So I'll make the adjustments there and crank it up more at nighttime, especially because I have a lot of zoas and acans, and the zoas retract in at nighttime. So it does help. And I've got a lot of fish in there right now that are waiting to be moved over to the 600. But when I ran the MP40s before on my Red Sea reefer, I used to do the same thing. I'd run them in different modes. I would crank it up at more at nighttime, and I had a lot of hammers and I had a lot of torches in there too, and they really got the benefits off there, and it took a lot of detritus out of there and suspended in the water column, so I was able to um, have some good flow at nighttime and keep the detritus suspended in the water column. On the two MP60s, I'll probably run them more into. I do like that Reef Crest option on there, and um, I really get some good benefits out of that when I used to run that. But I'll probably keep it more lower flow during the day and then crank it up at nighttime as you're doing on there. So I'll probably have a lot more benefits doing that. I've just got to figure out what I'm going to run on the other side. So uh, it's not in the budget right now to run a couple more MP60s, so I'm probably going to go with the gyres.
Yeah, it does get expensive once you start throwing a lot of pumps at a big tank.
Yeah,
Definitely feel you there. It
yeah,
does get expensive.
yeah,
Uh,
it does. I got those two MP60s about 6 or 7 months ago, but that's why I was on the fence, but I'm pretty much going to go with the gyre so they can move a wall of water versus you're dealing with more of a cone spherical shape on the MPs. Um, but I know quite a few people do use the gyres on larger systems, and they've had good success with it. So, since we're dealing with more flow here, that's why I decided to go mostly with the gyres on the other side. So, just got to figure out what model I'm going to go with here and how I'm going to mount
I have a feeling you're going with the biggest. I'm
them.
just guessing.
I'll probably go with the XF 350s or the 280s. The reason why is because I might mount the gyres on top, put the magnet on the top, and have the gyres. I, they come down about an inch or inch and a quarter, so I could point them down into the water column where the water would come back up this way. Um, if that doesn't work, then I'll have to get the XF 280s because my panels are 1 inch thick, and I think that's the only gyre that goes over 1 inch or an inch and a quarter. So.
Actually, that's an interesting problem you're running into. I mean, this is just something most of us with average
Yeah.
size to smaller tanks don't run into
Yeah.
is the thickness of the glass is an issue for you. If it's too thick, the magnets aren't working. So
Right.
that's a problem a lot of us don't run into.
Yeah, my panels are 1 inch thick on there, so I've got to. That's one thing that's stopping me right now. I don't want the gyre to go ahead and break loose from there when I've got it mounted on there and just wind up falling down in there and just creating havoc in the sand bed. So um, I'm more than likely going to go with the XF 280 on there and just dial them down a little bit. So
Yeah, so flow seems to do several functions in a reef tank. Probably one of the most important is that detritus removal. So if anything builds up on a coral or something, it'll blow it off. It'll help get the mucus off the coral. But it also helps the coral respirate, for lack of better words. So it's real important that corals have good flow. And then, of course, randomized flow is real important. So we want that water to be kind of changing directions and really kind of hitting the coral from every direction. And the great thing about modern pumps and controllability is you can really program that kind of stuff in. So we've made huge gains in flows. The one thing that has surprised me is the differences in the type and the amounts of flow that corals seem to want. So SPS and softies, in my experience in general, will tend to just love flow. They don't really care unless you're like really just blasting them just stupid crazy. LPS, on the other hand, seem to like lower flow because they want to be flat and fluffy and open. And I've seen major changes from just individual corals, the way they open up and stuff, just based on the amount of flow. And really, lower flow for LPS seems like the way to go. So that's why I love the idea of running the higher flow at night. It just allows to get that kind of detritus mix up and all that, and still gets me those big fluffy LPS.
right, I ran the higher flow on my Red Sea Reefer before at nighttime, mostly on the reef crest mode where it would ramp up then come down. I did run the higher flow on that system there. So on the frag tank, I've got it the other way around, but I'm going to make some adjustments and ramp it up more at nighttime. But I do have it set low because I have a Vector M1 on the other side of my frag tank, and the corals really like it. I'm running the zoanthids, acans, especially with hammers or torches. It seems like torches can take more flow than the hammers can. However, if you're running too high of on the power heads, if you're running at too high of a percentage, what happened was you're going to want to blowing the flesh off there, really pulling the flesh off the torches or the hammers, and basically they're going to grow funny and they're not going to like it, or they're just going to retract in. And I've seen it on other people's systems where they've got a smaller tank with a big power head in there, and their torches are pulling one way, and it's like, you don't understand that because they like you said, they like to be more fluffy. When you have the flow down a little bit
Yeah,
lower than SPS, then they respond better. You can tell.
yeah, it's funny because what you just described is kind of how my first aquarium worked. I got like a Maxi Jet 1200, and well, I got one in each corner, and there was basically zero controllability, and they just kind of blew, and the corals were just kind of blowing one direction,
Right,
and
right.
they
And
weren't so
also,
happy with that.
we can't, we try to replicate what's out in the wild, but the ocean's pull is far greater than what we can imagine. Um, but definitely, especially when you're dealing with an LPS, they do like the lower flow. They can't tolerate the higher flow like the SPS. So that's why I keep it down, and mine respond pretty well with it too.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I just think of candy canes as one of my indicator species on flow because in my tank upstairs, so in the 210 upstairs, the heads are real small, and then the frag tank, the heads are real big, and it's just straight down to the flow itself, like
Yes.
exact same water quality, similar lighting, not the same, but I
Right.
mean neither one's in bright light, and yet it's big heads versus small heads, just strictly based on flow.
Yeah, I've had candy canes also, and that's pretty indicative on there. They're a good indicator. If you're running too high of a flow, they'll just close up on you. You can tell even the water parameters, like you said, can be the same on two different systems. And if you're running them under directional flow or it's too much, they'll just retract in versus being open and fluffy.
Yeah, absolutely. So flow's a fun one. It's really important to figure this out, but I almost think it's one that sometimes people like overthink in this hobby because if you can get it fairly randomized and you can get a level where your corals are performing fine and you're getting good to try to stir it up, that's kind of the goal. That's really all we got to shoot for. So you can really simplify it down to that level.
Yeah,
So
when I got into the hobby back in 2015, I started off with a 300 I had from my freshwater days, and I had two of the J-Bow RW20s. I still have those pumps, and they're a great pump. They don't have all the bells and whistles of a higher tech pump like the Ecotechs, but they're still programmable. And if it's within your budget, I'd recommend going with a more expensive pump that might last you. But I still have these RW20s right now, and I've had to utilize one of them. Um, but when it comes to controllability, you're going to get more when you're going with it. Unfortunately, the higher price pump when you're going with like an Ecotech. Um, Also, too, I heard they're beta testing this Mobius, where you can program your MPs through your phone.
that'll
So
be cool.
yes, that'll be really nice. You can be away from your system and program it that way. So I'm kind of excited about that to see that come out.
So with programming, I know you've got a full Apex system. Will you be using that to run your pumps, or are you going to try to use the controls that come with the pump?
I'll run them through the Apex. Yeah.
Okay, that'll be nice. That'll give you kind of a
Right.
one-stop shop for controllability.
Right. And if they do this Mobius, they get done past the beta testing, I believe I can run my Vectras and my MP60s through Mobius. So if that's the
Nice.
case, that will be nice. So I'm going to inquire on that more. I know that Devin from Reef Dudes is part of that testing program right now with Mobius. So I'm going to probably confer with him and talk to him more about it. But um, uh, I'm interested to see some feedback on that. So I think that's going to be forthcoming at the end of the year or first part of next year. But until then, I'll run it through the Apex. I don't think I can run the returns through my Apex. I've got to see if I can, but I don't think I can. So I might have to run them on a separate system. I'm really, as good as Apex is, I'm really ambivalent about running my life support on one system. I will have
Right?
backups, huh?
I said right.
Yeah. So
A
yeah,
1 point failure for the entire
no,
tank
I
is a
know.
little scary. I feel you there.
That's why I think
I,
redundancy is important. So
I think I might have like an extra return pump or something outside of the
yeah,
apex.
yeah. So I'll be getting another return pump for that, just in case something happens and I need to hook up something real quick. So definitely don't want to have to rely on the Apex in case something I get a failure.
No, that is a good point. There is a lot of bonus to um, using equipment off of the apex or even on a different electrical circuit for a failure point because flow is almost the most important thing if you lose power. Um, our corals can take relatively low temperatures. I mean, I've seen corals come in at like 50 degrees that have been shipped to me and they're fine.
Hmm.
They can handle the cold. They can handle a lot of things. They can't be starved of oxygen. They got to keep that flow going. And it's like the most important part. So, the separate circuit's a great idea just for that redundancy to keep things going. But I guess also another important part has got to be some sort of battery backup. So
Right.
either the Airstone pumps or the batteries for like the MP60 or something like that. All of those have got to be really important because eventually you will lose power.
I have a couple of battery backups. I don't think an Airstone is going to do much difference in my tank.
Well, yours is extra big. The backup
So,
Airstone may not handle
yeah.
600 gallons,
Considering I just have the Cobalts,
which are fantastic air pumps.
they're great for smaller applications. But yeah, I do have a couple of Ecotech battery backups for the tank that I purchased last year. So I'll be hooking that up also in case, God forbid, there is a power outage. And up here in the Pacific Northwest, that happens every year. So I do have a generator also as another backup.
Oh, that's huge.
Yeah, I do have a generator for that, just for that purpose there. But the Ecotechs, I believe, can run those. The battery backups can run those power heads, I believe, for 12 or 18 hours at
Which is
50.
important. That way you can be away at work, power can go off, and you've got time to get home and fix the problem.
Right. Yeah, or hope and pray the power comes back on.
Right. But no, I mean, sometimes it doesn't. I mean, I don't know how many people lose tanks because the power goes out at night and their tank crashes before they even get to it in the morning. I mean, just because they've got all of those fish and all of that life in there consuming oxygen while there's no flow. So to have something that auto comes on is so important.
Right. And like you said, corals can take swings in temperature, but they cannot be without any kind of oxygen. They will
Yeah.
starve. And the fish seem to go a little bit longer without oxygen. I've had that a couple of power outages when I had freshwater systems, and it didn't really hurt my fish too much. But especially with corals, though, I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong, but corals, you're talking about hours. They can perish in 4 to 5 hours, I believe, if without a proper flow.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it's related to the amount of bioload in the tank. So a heavy load with lots of coral, lots of fish, that's going to use the oxygen up so much faster than a big tank with just a couple corals in it, which is
Right,
why we can get away with shipping a little frag in a little bag, but you can't ship large colonies without
right,
lots of water and oxygen and all
right,
that
right.
to keep
And I
going.
plan on having a fairly good sized bioload in there, so that's important. And that's one thing I thought about when I was building this system is a battery backup. So right away, I purchased two of them for that system.
That's fantastic. Well, I think we've had a pretty good talk about flow. We're 28 minutes in. Is there anything else you want to add before we go?
No, we've covered quite a bit on there. I'm going to be doing some more research and see which set of gyres I need to get for the 600 build. But hopefully my tank will be full here within the next day or two, so I can go ahead and get those on there.
Well, I can't wait to see this thing getting up and running. I want to see some videos, and I will definitely be watching Instagram and Facebook.
All
So,
right.
thank you, Darren, for joining me. I just like these talks. Darren and I, we just basically talk on the phone at night anyway. So we thought we'd just throw some video out on us on our
Yeah.
conversations because why not?
Well, thanks for
So
having me on.
So we'll see you guys on the next one, and we'll just keep these kind of shows coming out as we get time to make them. So
All right.
thanks for watching.
Thank you.
All right, let's stop recording.